Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Fredrickson. Welcome once again to Business Profiles here on the world of Zoom as we invite as our guest today someone who, very busy schedule, but I was able to grab him for a couple of minutes here for us here on JCTV Channel 6 and also for you folks watching on YouTube. Mike Paone, good friend, Joliet Chamber of Commerce, and he's with I think the proper title is VP and Government Affairs Guy. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Hey, you're looking mighty fine there, sir.
Well, thank you. As are you.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, are you on, I think I'm on WebEx and Facebook, FaceTime, Zoom, and there's one other, Skype throughout the day. I think I have more meetings now than I did when I was actually working at the office. Oh, yeah. I'm going to tap into your sources because you almost on a weekly basis through your webpage, I believe, give kind of an update on a weekly basis from the chamber about all the different things we're actually going to talk about today. But you do it on a weekly basis.
Yeah, we've made a point since all this started back in mid-March to send out what has turned into just about a daily update as far as the news of the day, whether it's on the local, state, or federal level concerning the pandemic and everything that goes along with it. I think over the last probably 3 or 4 weeks, we've then turned and have done a video recap on Friday, and that goes out on Facebook and our YouTube channel, LinkedIn, Twitter, all those fun social media accounts.
Yeah. What would we have done 10, 12, 15 back in those days? That's remarkable that we have them, and it's a blessing that we can use them today to reach as many people as possible with the updates and the information that we receive from folks like you all the way up to the government. Which I'm sure you're probably is the Joliet Chamber. I do this with our elected officials, so I'm going to put a surprise question there for you, but I know you know the answer. The official title is Joliet Region Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So what territory does, it's more than the city of Joliet, I know that. What's the region?
Well, predominantly outside of Joliet, come from the surrounding communities. So Crest Hill, Shorewood, Plainfield, everything. I would say anybody that's within a, let's say, 5 to 10 mile radius. But we do not have technically any boundaries. So we have some members that may be in Oak Brook or Schaumburg or Morris. Over the years, we've actually have had members outside of the state of Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, going back a number of years, just because of, the industry that's here, whether it's the casinos or hospitals, Caterpillar. We've had members as far away as Las Vegas and California, because they may be suppliers for the larger companies.
Yeah, I think it's always good to remind viewers and listeners of just how important and how big the commerce and industry is here in the Joliet region. I mean, it really is. That always irritates me a bit when they do the road reports or the weather reports on some of those channels in Chicago. And it's improving because now they know we're out here. But for years and years, it was always Chicago, and then they would do some of the suburbs, and then they'd mention Rockford, and they wouldn't say anything about Joliet. And we're still, I think, number 3 in the state for population, and not just population, but all the other industry and business that we have here in the Joliet region. When did you start? When did you begin working with the chamber?
Well, interesting story. It's really probably something I'll never forget. I started on September 10th, 2001. So one day into the job was 9/11. And wow. Obviously, it's a very memorable start to my career. This is the only I like to say the only real job I've held. I graduated college in May of 2001 and started the chamber in September of 01.
Wow.
So it's
Great
about
transition.
19 years.
19 years, unbelievable. Well, let's get down to brass tacks here because I've got a lot of territory to cover here with you. We're kind of focusing on a lot with the small businesses that hopefully are watching on YouTube or here on channel 6. So far, currently, now we're doing this conversation. It's going on Zoom and being taped on May the 14th. So if you see this next week, which would be the week of the 16th, 17th, some of this may be updated. But currently, right now, I guess the overall umbrella question would be, what's the status? What's going on with these SBA loans? Anything at all here locally, regionally?
Well, so I'll talk about 2 SBA loans. The original loan that started back in March was an EIDL loan. And that originally, it was a low interest loan that came out. You could ask for a advance that was a grant that would assist with payroll, wouldn't have to pay that back. There were a number, I guess an onslaught is probably the best word to describe it, of companies that applied for that. Unfortunately, the system became extremely overwhelmed and overloaded. And just talking to our members, a lot of them were able to get in. They were confirmed, but to this day have not received their money because of just the numerous people that had gone in through that system. So that's then when the SBA and Congress decided then to put into play the PPP program. That's the Paycheck Protection Program. And as you all know, that's what's out there today. So jumping back to the EIDL loan, at the time, that paused as well as the PPP paused because they both ran out of money. So after Congress then decided to replenish those funds, the PPP reopened. And unfortunately, the EIDL did not. It just recently reopened, but only for agricultural businesses. And another thing that we had found out through the SBA, those that had applied for the EIDL, they rolled out a new system then the 1st of April. They were asked to resubmit their application inside the new portal because it was supposed to speed things up and make it easier. Unfortunately, at that same time, there was a lot of talk about phishing schemes, spam emails, that type of thing, trying to entice people. And a number of our members reported not seeing the email directing them to do that. So that's one of the things that we've pushed out over the last week is to remind and notify them that they need to go back into the system and quote unquote reapply. They're gotten guidance from SBA that they are supposed to retain their spot in line, that it's not going to affect them negatively by reapplying. It should only help to speed things up. So going forward, we're hoping open to all businesses, not just the agricultural businesses. And then number 2 is that the SBA will be able to catch up processing the applications for all of those that did originally apply. Now, the PPP is a little bit different in that it's set up to be 2.5 times your average payroll. And you can, depending on which time period you take that when your business started, you can go back to 19 or the beginning of this year. The one thing, I think the major intention on that one was to keep employees paid by their employer and to keep them off of unemployment. What we have since found out, and I think this is because of the conditions that we're under here in Illinois and just overall in the country, It seems like, maybe at the beginning it wasn't anticipated that this would take as long as it has for getting back to business as usual. So they put in a 75%, 25% split, where those funds, 75% was to go towards payroll, and 25% then could go to expenses like rent, mortgage, utility payments. So the issue that has popped up, and we have heard from a good number of our members that they were able to apply for that PPP money. So going back to the EIDL, that all went through the SBA's website. The PPP is something that goes through local banks. So at the beginning, we were telling our members, if you've got an existing relationship, if you've got loan, you've got accounts with a bank or two or three in some cases, get out and talk to them right away, because they're the ones that are going to be able to help you through this. And ultimately, they're the ones that are going to submit that application and lend out to you. So again, going back then to the parameters of the loan, what we're hearing from our members then is that they're not open. So already a majority of their employees have been furloughed or laid off. So, and not being open, as you can imagine, doesn't help with paying the rent and paying other things. So, the big question became, is there a way? And we began talking to our representatives and senators on the federal level, letting them know that this is harming the businesses, because we've got members that are 2 months going on 3 months behind on rent, and if they could use that money, that grant money, and pay it on that end rather than the employee end, and let them go on unemployment, then in the end, when this all hopefully wraps up and we can get back to business as usual, they'll be in business and they'll have jobs for people to come back to. So the recent language in what's now being called the HEROES Act reduces and hopefully will wipe out that percentage split, as well as elongating some of the time periods. But until there's any movement on that, they haven't even voted on that in the House yet, we'll see how that changes. So that's kind of the long drawn out answer there.
No, it's a good one. Good one. That's why I called on you, because you're a detail guy, and I wanted that information to come our way. Just ever so briefly, just for the downtown areas, there's going to be a press release out on this, but the downtown area, or what they call the SSA area, they pay some additional tax. The City Center Partnership, which is another entity in downtown Joliet that focuses on just downtown and just those businesses. And so the retailers and the restaurants that applied for a free grant, not a loan, but free grant, to help them with some of those issues that you just talked about, rent and paying some employees. They can have their choice of which one they need, whether it's the rent that they got to take care of, or their mortgage, or their employees. Grant money up to $2,500 has been given out to those who qualify, and there were at least over 20 who have received that grant money, and there'll be more possibly than that. It could be upwards of 27 that have received that grant money. And that comes not from the city, but from the City Center Partnership, a separate entity completely. So there's some help there for the downtown areas. Now, you mentioned unemployment, and I'm going to do two things here, because I'm also self-employed. So the second question will be about what about us self-employed people? But let's tackle unemployment first. What's happening there?
Well, keep up with the news. Probably nothing good. Don't want to be a downer on that, but I think today's latest numbers were just under, I think we're under 3 million from last week nationally. So I think that puts us up to, it's either 36 or 39 million nationwide in unemployment. So, I mean, we're shattering records, going back, hundreds of years. So, they did pass that those that are self-employed, independent contractors, can now file for unemployment. Illinois that opened up here. Again, another portal opened up on this past Monday, actually the 11th. So those that are 1099s can go in and file. So here's another tricky situation that has to be navigated through. Those that want to do that need to go into the system and submit a claim. It'll then go back to the business that businesses that they do work for, and then the business has to deny that claim. Deny it as that they're not, an employee, that they're a 1099, and then that has to go back. Once they have that denial, then those individuals can then go back in and resubmit, and that's how then they can receive those benefits. So again, it's just more extra work, as everybody's trying to survive and get through. It seems that there's more and more steps that keep piling on.
Yeah. But it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile going through a little bit of those
certainly
groups and loops. A lot of contractors are out there, especially here in the Joliet region, in all industry and all businesses. There's more and more of the self-employed and contractors out there. Something called CARES 2 proposals.
Right.
Now, you unwrap the details of that for us.
Well, there's a lot. I think the speaker and the Democrats wanted to get out as much as possible so that it could be negotiated in the Senate on the Republican side. So they went big. So they've talked about for a long time the need for more funding back to states and then down to counties and cities. So I believe that final number came out to be a little over $900 billion, which is certainly needed. We just put out in our report last night, we've been hearing from Joliet and where their finances are and the loss of revenue, but just looking around the state and the region, some of the other numbers from the smaller villages and cities, obviously everybody is hurting. So that's definitely good news. There was probably about 4 or 5 proposals that would have given out new individual stimuluses. Some of them were $2,000 a month for every month until this ends. Some of them were higher than that. I think upwards of might have been $4,000 until the end of the year, or again until this ends. Just looking, remembering back, I think one of them, I did the math. If it was to come out for a household with 2 adults, it would come out over a year to be a salary basically of $96,000. So there was a number of different proposals that were out there. In the end, what they ended up doing was just mirroring what they did in the original CARES Act, and that's the $1,200 per individual and a maximum of $6,000 per household. The one thing that they did change was originally you could get a payment for anybody that was a dependent under 17, and now they've changed that to any dependent in the household. They did put language in there to keep the extra $600 a week in unemployment insurance payments that was put through in the original CARES. That was supposed to expire at the end of July. So if this bill goes through in current form, that would extend that extra $600 a week payment till the end of January. There was some healthcare language in there. One of the biggest things on that was for those that had been furloughed or lost their job, it would require employers to pick up and cover the subsidies, the full premium for employees that go on COBRA. So that was another thing. It talked about hazard pay for those on the front lines, hospital, police, fire, those type of workers, which I think is certainly a positive. Those people are working hard and certainly deserve that too. Testing, tracing, Even went into some money for the Postal Service. One of the big things that they have started talking about, and there's language in this bill, is about the November elections and funding a system to do all by mail ballots. And then the last thing, one of the biggest things, was allowing then the House to do their committee work and then also to eventually vote remotely rather than having to then appear in person. So those were kind of the original ones. And then after digging into it a little bit deeper, yesterday we came across some more things that kind of have to do. I mentioned some of them with the PPP, getting rid of that 75-25 split. Originally, if you once you did get that money, you were supposed to expend it over 8 weeks. They would like to extend it to 24 weeks. And then there was a clause in there. So you get the full forgiveness if your payroll and or headcount did not drop below 75%. So those companies that did lay people off, they were given the opportunity to bring those employees back and pay them by June 30th. And if so, then they could still give that forgiveness. So that deadline has been changed until December 31st. And then just some other language about some medical leave, things like that. But it was I believe an 1,800-page bill. So you can imagine the number of things that are still probably need to be brought out to the public.
Yeah. Well, a bit more of a controversial question coming up here. You don't need to be involved in the controversy, but it is, and that is, restoring the state back to, through phases, and if you could just kind of go through the phases, but more important than the controversy is the regions. Joliet is in that Chicago region, but I'll let you explain that. That's a Northeast region, isn't it?
Yeah. So the state's broken down into 4 regions. We have landed in what is, you're right, called the Northeast region. It's Will County, Cook County, and all the other surrounding counties with us. I believe there's a total of 6 or 7 in our region. There's then I believe it's a central, a southern, and I forget what they call, to the west with Rockford, maybe the northwest. But each region can advance through phases on their own. We don't have to advance as a state through phases. There's work right now being done, as you probably have seen the newspaper, here on the radio, that not a lot of people are happy with Will County and the Joliet region being lumped in with Cook County and Chicago, as are other areas. And so there's work going on behind the scenes to separate that out from 4 regions to 11 regions. To my understanding, the Illinois Department of Public Health divides the state into 11 regions. So there's an effort to try to follow those boundaries and divide up into a little bit more, so that everybody's not so tied to larger areas that may have higher numbers of cases. And so, yes, you mentioned there are 5 phases. We are in phase 2 right now. I think the biggest number and the biggest feedback that we've heard is, looking at some other state plans, the big thing here in Illinois is, in order to get to the next phase, there has to be 28 days of testing percentages under 20%. And I think we're achieving that right now. Mm-hmm. I know in the 3 regions, they definitely are. And from looking at the numbers over the last couple of days, I think our area is. But again, there's always that possibility that just one day over 20%, I believe, restarts the clock then. So you see, there's been a couple of counties that have put out resolutions in defiance of the plan. The governor has come back and said that that's not appreciated, and there might be some recourse, some withholding of funds. I know with bars and restaurants, the Illinois Liquor Commission has gotten involved and has threatened to pull license. So I think just with a lot of things, we'll kind of see how it plays out. But I think one of the big things is, in the next phase, you can go back to having meetings and gatherings of 10 people. In phase 4, we can go back to gatherings of 50 people. And then in that phase, it allows then the restaurants, bars, places like that to ease back the restrictions and operate at not full capacity yet, but limited capacity. And then ultimately, phase 5 is basically a full reopening and a return to normal. And that would allow gatherings of any size. But that's contingent on having a vaccine or a drug medicine that will effectively combat the effects of the virus.
I would think there's probably an official stand by the Joliet Chamber, which probably would somewhat reflect the governor's mandates as well, but to just use some common sense and I'll let you express responsibly opening businesses, the Chamber's advice on that.
I think that's the ultimately that's the best word is be responsible. So I think over the last couple of days I'm having this conversation a lot is the biggest thing now that sits in front of us is liability issues. And that's on a government level, that's on a business level. Even when this was all announced going back a few weeks, businesses were concerned, certain ones that can't keep the social distancing of 6 feet. Businesses are required to provide PPE, so face masks, things of that nature to their employees. So that starts one question, is there access to enough for all these businesses for face masks, for gloves, for cleaning supplies, to make sure that you're disinfecting. There was a workers' comp situation that came up weeks back where the state had tried to push through that anybody without having to prove it would be able to file a workers' comp claim if they were infected with the virus and could say that they contracted it at work. That was fought through the courts, and right now is kind of sitting on the sidelines, but don't think that's going to be it for that. But that's the biggest thing. So again, going back to some of the counties that have passed this resolution, they've also all put out the disclaimer, before you get any ideas of opening up, talk to your legal counsel and also talk to your insurer. Being in defiance of any orders, you may not be insured. So I think the correct way to go about it is through the legislative process, whether it's cities, counties, getting court orders or some type of permission from the governor's office. But I really think that the best way, and hopefully what will happen next week, is General Assembly is being called back to Springfield on Wednesday, and they will, from what we've heard, will begin to take up not only the budget but other issues that are affected here by the virus. So I think that'll be a way to start having those conversations to see that if we can move towards loosening up those restrictions and trying to let areas open up, as long as so that's one of the words that the Illinois Chamber is using as they have these conversations, is changing from the terminology of essential business to safe businesses, because the feeling is that every business is essential. Ask any business owner and they'll tell you that their business is essential. Ask their customers and clients, and they'll tell you that their product services that they're seeking are essential. So as long as the the owners are taking all the necessary precautions and steps to safeguard their office, their place of business, not only for their employees, but their customers too, then, you know, if it's okay for a big box store to be open and have, you know, X amount of people inside, how is it not okay for, say, the hobby shop across the street to be open?
Good question. Mike Paone, you have been delightful, informational, and exactly what I thought you would be for this interview. I thank you on behalf of the Joliet Chamber. We've been talking with Mike Paone, who is Vice President, Government Affairs, and I don't know if we're going to put it on the screen or not, but let's contact information for you, Mike.
Sure. You can contact the Chamber office at 815-727-5371. That's 815-727-5371. Our website is www.jolietchamber.com, and we have created a COVID-19 resource page. So if you visit the website, it's one of the main sliders on the home screen there. You can open up that page, and we've archived all of our daily updates there, as well as video recordings. We've been doing virtual conferences with timely subjects. And then there's probably now upwards of 36 forms on there that go over what we've talked about today, the EIDL, the PPP, unemployment, the governor's orders, anything and everything that has come out. Like I said, we've archived it there on the website.
Okay. Mike, thank you so much. And we may do this again, depending on what happens with this plague virus that we're going through. But we thank you, and we thank all the businesses in the Joliet region for those who are open with pickups and carryouts and curbside service. And we wish the very best to them and the best to you, Mike Paone from the Joliet Chamber of Commerce. Thank you.